Shalom Aleichem for Erev Shabbat, Erev Yom Kippur. Mishnah Yomi is in chapter 5 of Bava Metzia, Mishnah Zayin Chet today. Mishnah 7, Ein Poskin ala Perot al Shietze Hashar. We do not posek to set a price and pay in advance for produce until there's actually a market rate. The worry is he'll put down $1,000 for wheat, and then when wheat comes to market and the prevailing price prevails, he'll get much more wheat than he had bargained for, and that looks a lot like ribit. This would be ribit de rabbanan. Yotza shar, once the price is, there's a market price available, poskin, you can go ahead and pay in advance for the wheat to be delivered later. The awful pisha ein lazeh, even though the seller you're giving the money to right now doesn't have the wheat on hand, yesh lazeh. He can get it somewhere else because there is a market rate. It is available at the market. So he could actually take the money and buy wine, and then sell the wine at a profit, and then later on use the profit to buy the wheat and deliver it to the customer who paid in advance. And that would be okay because there is wheat available to buy at that price. If he was the first of the harvesters, there's no prevailing market rate yet because he's the first one to cut the wheat on his field. Posekimo olegodish, he can set a price for him on the stack, even though it sits still in a stack, it hasn't been processed, it's not ready to go to market. V'la'ovit shalanovim, and the same too with a vat of grapes. They're sitting there in the vat, they still have to be pressed into juice, into wine. Alamotan shel zaitim, or a vat of olives that are waiting to be pressed into olive oil. Olive beitzim shel yotzer, on the clay balls that the potter has. It's the raw material that the potter will use to make the kalim, to make the pots. V'al hasid misheshikei bekivshan, and plaster once they put it in the furnace, and that's sort of the preliminary step to preparing the plaster to be used as a construction material. The idea here is, even though the item is not available to sell at market right now, it's on the way. The raw material and the fruit itself is available, is ready. He could go ahead and make a price with the seller and give the money now. And he could go ahead and pay in advance for fertilizer, usually made from animal droppings, all year round. After all, there's animals all year round. They're going to be making droppings, and someone can collect them and sell them, provide them on a weekly or monthly basis whenever you need. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ein poskin ala zevel, elim ken haitalo zevel be'ashpa. No, you can't pay in advance with a set price for a fertilizer contract unless the seller actually has fertilizer in the ashpa, in the garbage, like in the heap already piled out back. The Chachamim Matirim, the sages allow it. The Gemara explains only in the summer when the animals are out and everyone has droppings, everyone has fertilizer available. It's interesting to note back in Bereshit, which is coming up soon, Avraham Avinu is described as being extremely rich because his zevel, he had more zevel than the king of Canaan. He had cornered the market on fertilizer, which is of course extremely valuable in an agricultural society. Now the Mishnah adds, Posek imo kishar hagavoha. The buyer and seller can agree to a price that's a high price, and they stipulate a condition that if the price goes down, the buyer will actually get the new lower price. Rabbi Yehuda Omer afal pisha lo pasak imo kishar hagavoha. Rabbi Yehuda says even if he didn't agree to a price and pay it in advance on condition he get a better price later if prices go down, Yacholhu lomar, the buyer can say to the seller, Ten li kazeh, give me the produce, supply the produce now at the lower price, O ten li motai, or give me back my money. The idea here is, in these cases, the buyer is entering a contract to be provided with fertilizer or produce, at a certain rate throughout the year, or whatever it is, the condition of their contract. But he wants to lock in a price now, but he's concerned the price might go down. So Rabbi Yossi says that's sort of an implied condition of the contract, because after all, he could say, give my money back, as whatever part of the money has not been spent on delivering the product yet. Now Mishnah Het teaches Malve Adam et Arisav, the landowner can lend the sharecropper chitim, wheat, bechitin, to get paid back the same wheat, lezera, to sow this, to plant it, avalo lechol, but not to eat it. Now the issue the Gemara explains is something called seah b'seah. You're giving a seah and you're getting back a seah. That's about 8 or 9 liters. Now, what's wrong with giving a seah and getting back a seah? Well, prices are not exactly static. If the prices were static, it really wouldn't be a problem. But if the price goes down and he gives back a seah, well, then he hasn't returned what he borrowed. If the price goes up and he gives back a seah, then he's giving ribit, he's giving interest to the one who lent out the seah. So it's very problematic in a society where you do have some fluctuations in prices. But here, this borrowing of chitim, of basically the seeds for the wheat, it's not for him to eat them and grind them up and make dough and challah, it's for him to plant them. And this is the sharecropper he's lending to, so it's part of their business arrangement. Part of their sharecropping contract is, the Gemara says in some places the sharecropper would provide the seeds, and if he didn't, really, the landowner could kick him out and say you're being negligent, but sometimes he would just borrow the seeds from the landowner, and of course, once he's harvested the wheat and there's extra seeds, you just give back the seeds. Now, the Mishnah adds interesting evidence, that this is allowed. Jahaya Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel was one of the Gedolei Ador. Malvi et arisav chitim bechitim lezeira. He would lend to his sharecroppers wheat kernels to plant and then get back at the end of the season once they had generated new wheat from it. But he did something really interesting. Beyoker v'chuzlu, if he gave them when wheat was at a high price and it became less expensive, O bezol v'hukru, or it was less expensive and then the prices went up, noto behen kishar hazol. He would take the wheat back at the lower rate. So he would always take back less if there was a fluctuation in price. You either take back less value or less volume of seeds. Not because the halacha requires this. He wanted to be machmir, he wanted to set the situation up where it would not look even a smidgen like ribis, no matter what happened to the prices. But really, with a sharecropper using it for planting, seah b'seah is allowed even if there's some price fluctuations. Have a wonderful Yom Kippur. Bezrat Hashem, I will pre-record, God willing.